My name is Edward Blum. I'm a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and the founder and director of the Project on Fair Representation. Well, I think I've described myself, and I think it's a reasonable description, as Yenta the matchmaker. If you remember Fiddler on the Roof, my role in not only Bush versus Vera, but the subsequent cases that followed, was to really sort of identify an area of the law that I think needed changing, or identify a policy that needed revisiting. Recruit a plaintiff to do that, hire a legal team, raise the funds to pay the legal team, and then basically try to keep the train on track and running on time. What skills does that require? I don't really think there are any special skills for that, other than I do recognize that I'm a one-trick pony. I know one area of the law fairly well. I don't know any other areas of the law at all, and perhaps that focus has allowed me to kind of tease out the most important issues that surround this advocacy, and not let it get cluttered up with tangential things. I grew up in a liberal Jewish household. My mom and dad were Roosevelt Truman Democrats. Our household was pro-civil rights. I am probably the first Republican that my mother ever met. Race was something that was an issue, I think, in Jewish households in the 50s and 60s. Jews, perhaps more than, I think there is a long history of Jewish advocacy in the civil rights movement. I think that looking at the early years of the NAACP and other racial advocacy groups, Jews played a very prominent role. My parents were not foot soldiers in that movement, but wrote checks when they could, or surely taught the family that race and ethnicity, have no bearing, as does religion, in our public lives. So I've had an interest in race, since I was a teenager. I think what crystallized my advocacy in this area was just seeing how the state of Texas, block by block, harvested out individuals based on their race in order to create these racially homogeneous voting districts. That is not what electoral districts are all about. The traditional districting principles always kept neighborhoods together. When I was a kid, you knew where the African American district was. You kind of knew where the Hispanic district was. That's because blacks and Hispanics lived in ghettos and barrios. Once African Americans and Latinos started moving to the suburbs in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was not necessary to continue drawing districts that went out and harvested these individuals and neighborhoods in order to maintain these districts. So I think that was the defining moment for me that got me interested in this movement. I guess I can probably answer that question best by giving you an anecdote. When I won the primary and became the nominee, I went to a very prominent Republican incumbent who had represented one of the Houston suburban districts for many, many years. Some of his neighborhoods had been redrawn into the new 18th Congressional District. And I went to him and asked him if he could help me identify some of the prominent African American businessmen, clergymen, and leaders who used to be in his district because they were now drawn into the 18th Congressional District, and I wanted to meet them. And his answer was, he didn't know any. He just didn't know any of the African Americans in his district. He had a 80% Anglo district. He didn't attend African American church events. He didn't attend African American high school graduation events. He just didn't reach out to that community. He was a little sheepish about it, but that's the outcome of drawing districts in which race is the predominant issue. Race is the predominant factor. There is no need for representatives to reach outside of their racial base if we're going to have race-based districting. In each case that we filed, from Texas to New York to South Carolina, the justification for creating these bizarrely shaped bug splat districts was that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act compels us to do this. Section 5 is the reason that we've had to create a district that went 175 miles down an interstate, just plucking out African Americans out of rural communities in order to create these safe African American districts. It was because of Section 5 that these states did it. That was the justification. And to me, if Section 5 was causing this kind of mischief, then Section 5 needed to be changed or updated or struck down. Well, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act not only controlled the shape of those congressional districts and the districts from city council to county commissioner throughout these covered jurisdictions, it also controlled a lot of other things: polling place location, voting hours, voter ID, things like that. But I was interested in changing Section 5 because of the command that these bizarrely shaped, what Justice O'Connor called racial apartheid districts, were blotting what I believed was the traditional sense of democratic geographic units as it pertains to election districts. Well, I didn't really have much fear that Congress would become, all white again in the Deep South, or there wouldn't be any Latinos in New York. And as it turns out, we have a laboratory for this. What happened in the state of Texas and New York and Virginia and South Carolina and Louisiana after these districts were redrawn? Well, African Americans, the African American representatives remain the same. Same with the Latino representatives. Nothing really changed in terms of the sort of the color of our congressional delegations. What I think did change, and what I hope will continue to change, is that as districts become more multiracial and less homogeneous, that white conservative Republicans are going to have to reach out and learn about their minority communities, and African American and Latino elected officials are going to have to reach out and learn more about their white conservative communities. There is a big body of literature that suggests that perhaps one of the reasons Congress is so polarized today is because of the creation of racially homogenous groups. It's not the only reason, of course, but it's one of the reasons, and it's my hope that as African Americans and Latinos continue to move out to the suburbs and our inner cities become more multiracial, that these districts become less politically polarized now that they no longer have to comport with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Well, I'll go back to an interesting anecdote. After the Supreme Court struck down the Texas Congressional Redistricting Plan and the 3-judge panel in Texas redrew districts, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who defeated the man I ran against in 1992 in the Democrat primary, did something very interesting. She went to the new neighborhoods that were added to her district and started meeting voters. The news cameras followed her, going door to door, introducing herself to these, new conservative, formerly, Republican voters. I think that's an important anecdote. I think now we can see the participation of African Americans in greater numbers at events that they typically didn't go to. And I think surely the Republican Party is attempting to reach out to minority communities, specifically Latino communities in the Deep South and the West, trying to do something that they didn't do before. So I think the outcome of these new, less gerrymandered multiracial districts could very well benefit both political parties.